Now, things that you need to know on table 1 in the study guide. It starts with stuff on the skull, okay? Table 1 is long list. In some of the study guides, it's an actual page. But here we're dealing with a list. And we've got a skull. Before anything else, let's do really, really easy. Are you with me? I'm going to say things and I want you to repeat. You're going to touch the bones on your own head as I say them. And then we're going to do the same thing with me touching them on the skeleton and you all say them. Ready?
Okay.
Frontal.
Frontal.
Parietal.
Parietal.
Temporal.
Temporal.
Occipital.
Occipital.
Zygomatic.
Zygomatic.
Maxillary.
Maxillary.
Mandible. Now, you're not going to do this because it'd be gross. If you stuck your fingers up in your nose, ethmoid, and then a little bit down, would be vomer. Good? I can make it real easy. This is your septum, right? And here it's all wiggly because it's cartilage. If you were reaching far enough in, it would be bone. The perpendicular plate of the ethmoid is hanging down, and the vomer is going up. That's the bony part at the back of the septum. Everybody good? All right. We also have a palatine bone. Underneath here, we talk about this being the hard palate. Let me move this out of the way to make it easier to see. I didn't mean for this to be the first one, but we might as well. This model is a little messed up in my opinion. These should not be separated. If you look at your skull, this and this are so close you may not even see the suture. But this in the front is part of this bone, the maxilla. It just has a horizontal part that we call the palatine process. Remember, this is your hard palate. Well, the front of it is the palatine process of the maxilla. The back of it, back here, these are palatine bones. Are you with me? Let me get the other skull out of the clear box to show you, one that's not so messed up. All right. Here, oh wow. If I get closer, can we see better? Stop the spring from moving. Yeah. I'm going to shade it if I can, if that'll help. It doesn't work really well, so I'll say it this way. Look at your skull. This is your maxilla, okay? So the bone your upper teeth are in. There. But when you get to the teeth, and they call the teeth, the spot where the teeth are, the alveolar margin. We'll get to that in a second. Alveoli are just holes, like, or spaces. Like in your lungs, all those little sacs are the alveoli. They're spaces, okay? So the spaces the teeth stick into, that's the alveoli, and the margin of the bone, where it goes from this to that, is where that is. So the alveolar margin is the tooth sockets. Good? Good? All right. But maxilla, I meant to say, maxilla, but palatine process of maxilla. And then at the back, right here, you see a suture. That's the palatine bone. See how it's not messed up like it was in the other one? It's not pulled away. Does anybody see that suture between the palatine process and the palatine bone? Here, here.
Yeah, this is
It's right there. See the suture line? Palatine bones, palatine process of maxillary bone. Found it? Yeah. Palatine bones, palatine process of maxillary bones. And by the way, what you just saw, that's really important. You are going to see that a lot in anatomy. Shh, hold it down, guys. Hold it down. He's recording. He's getting your talking in the background. It's freaking me out. Pay attention here. What you just saw, you're going to see again and again and again in anatomy. We just named a process, a piece of the maxillary bone for the bone it is touching, right? For the palatine bone. Well, same thing. This, your cheekbone, that is your zygomatic bone. This is the zygomatic arc. It is named, zygomatic bone has right here, but if you look, there's a suture, there's a line. The back of it, the back of the arch, is part of the temporal bone. So what do we call this piece of the temporal bone that sticks forward? The zygomatic process of the temporal bone. This is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. This whole thing is the zygomatic arc.
And the process is where the two bones meet?
Yes, the process is, thank you for getting me back on track. The process is named for what it touches. It touches the zygomatic bone, so it is the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. On the test, you need the whole thing. Let's go with another example to do the same thing. When we look at our long bones, no, come on. Why do I have to pull fibulus when I'm looking for other things? All right, so when we look right here, we have a radius and an ulna. Are you with me? The radius is named the radius because the end is round, just like a circle has a radius. Good. Proximal end is round. It's a radius. This is the ulna. There is a spot in the ulna right there, scooped out where the radius fits just perfect. See that? That is the radial notch of the ulna. Are you with me? Okay. We named this feature, this bony feature, this notch, after what it touches. It touches the radius, so it is the radial notch of the ulna. Good? Don't worry, we're going to be going over all these things again. I just want to emphasize that we name things in anatomy after what they touch. Good? All right, so this is an ulna, like it was just holding there, and this end of it is called the olecranon process. Are you with me? Now look, when you straighten an elbow, the olecranon process comes up and pushes into the humerus, right? The distal end of the humerus. And you see this divot right here, this little dip? It's named for the olecranon. This is the olecranon fossa of the humerus. Good? Yeah? Yeah, I did the whole Vanna thing there. You got it, yes? So the principle here, we name things in anatomy often for what they touch. And you're going to see that again and again. You might as well get used to it. That was the first one. All right, let's actually start through the list now. Wait, I said we were going to do this again. All right, so name the bone.
The frontal.
Very good. Name the bones.
Parietal. Parietal.
Parietal. Name the bones.
Temporal.
Very good. Name the bones.
Occipital.
Very good. Name the bones.
Zygomatic.
Very good. Very good. Oh, we didn't talk about this, but this is your mandible right here. And, oh, look, what do you think we call that?
It's the ear canal.
No, that's right behind it. What I was pointing out was the articular surface there. What I wanted to get is that this would be a mandibular fossa of the temporal bone. It's the same principle. Does that work? Yep. Okay, so let's go through these now, starting at the beginning. So, in the skull, well, I guess first we'll do axial skeleton. That's actually part of chapter 8, which you're doing. But axial is the stuff in the middle, okay? Like a wheel goes around an axis, all right? Or the world goes around an axis. Axial would be the center of the skeleton. We're talking about the skull, we're talking about the vertebral column, we're talking about the ribs, and we're talking about the sacrum, okay? Oh, and the coccyx, the little tailbone. We're not talking about the stuff in yellow here. All the things in this model that are on yellow, this is the appendicular, the legs and the parts of the pelvic girdle that are not the sacrum, those are appendicular. The arms, that's appendicular. Does this make sense? Okay. So with that in mind, let's start on axial, which is just this, that. All right. So the skull, it says there are 8 bones they want you to know. The frontal bone, good? Yes.
What are these shoulders and the shoulder blades considered?
I believe that they, just like the pelvic girdle, I believe the shoulder girdle, all of it, I'd have to double check, but I believe both the clavicles here, the collarbones, and the scapula, the shoulder blades, I believe they're going to put those into appendicular.
Appendicular, not
Yeah.
axial.
That's what I think. We'll know in just a moment as we go through, but I think that's correct. All right, the first thing I want you to look at is on the frontal bone. Look at your skull, and you will notice they're better on this skull. They're better on this skull. You'll see them better on this one. Right above the eye orbit, the eye socket. Okay, this is the eye socket where the eyes go. looking above it, let's see, this would be correct orientation for you guys. I'm going to zoom out. That's far enough. Okay. Do you see this notch right here?
Off screen.
Oh, thank you. You see this notch right here? This notch right here, I'm going to hold it up now so you guys can see it this way. There's a notch right here. I'm putting the paper clip in it. A notch right here. Those have a really logical name. They are supraorbital notches. Supra because they're above the orbit, good. And notch because it's a notch, but they're not always. On some people, they're just a little higher up, and then we call it a supraorbital foramen. It's a what? Yeah, supra for above, orbital for the hole, and this little, if it's a teeny hole, then it'd be a supraorbital foramen, but most people it's a supraorbital notch. And some people have one that's a notch, one that's a foramen, whatever. But that's the first bony marking to know is a supraorbital foramen or notch. Good? Top of your table 1, everybody see it in their phone? Yeah, okay. The next thing, that was part of the frontal bone. The parietal bone is not asking you to learn any bony features. You just need to know where they are, okay? Let's go ahead and do some things before we go any further. They're further down on this list, they have sutures, but we can do some of these really fast. Hey, what was the name for this plane right here through the skull?
Coronal.
Coronal plane. What do you think we call this suture between the frontal
Coronal
bone
suture.
and the parietals? There's a suture right here.
Coronal suture.
Coronal suture. It's the same plane. Okay. Hey, the two parietals where they come together. There's a suture that's like this. That resembles what plane?
The
Sagittal.
sagittal.
Yes, that's your sagittal suture. So sagittal plane. Good. There's a reason why we learn the planes before we learn the skull. It makes it easier to learn parts of the skull. Just like there's a reason why we're going to learn bones before we learn muscles. A lot of the muscles are named after the bones they are over. Does that make sense? Or over the regions. Think your pectoralis major or your rectus abdominis. Rectus means straight, it's straight over the abdomen. Or rectus femoris, it's straight over the femur. If you memorize your bones really well, then that's not hard. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right, so there's a reason why you do things in order. Now let's talk about the mandibular fossa. Oh, we did the mandibular fossa. It is part of the temporal. It's the first thing on the list of the temporal. Your temporal was right here. Do we agree? Not up high where the parietal is, down here. This is temporal, around where the ear canal goes in. And that's one of the things, the external auditory meatus. So our mandible articulates right here. There's a spot full of cartilage where the tip right here, I started to say coordinate, but it's not. It would be the condyle. The mandibular condyle is this big sticky up part right here. The mandibular condyle sticks up and it articulates with it, rubs on this spot on the temporal bone. So that would be your mandibular fossa. Good? All right? Because the mandible's rubbing there. Now the external auditory meatus, on your model, it's not a good hole like it would be on a real skull. It's this divot right here. The plastic they poured in the mold was too thick to make a hole that goes all the way in, but the external auditory meatus is a hole that goes in, okay?
That's the ear canal?
Yeah, it's just in back and up a little bit from the fossa. Good? All right? Posterior and cranial, I should say. All right, and inside of that, that's where those three bones, the hammer, the stirrup, the anvil, that's where those would be. Are we good? Yes? All right, so we talked about the temporal bone. We talked about the fact that it has a mandibular fossa. We talked about the fact it's an external auditory meatus. We talked earlier about the zygomatic process of the temporal bone. That's from there to there on the zygomatic arc. Are we good? All right, why do I not see? Oh, I do see someone actually finding the things on their skull. You should be, two people, I see two people. You should be finding things on your skull, not just staring at me. Good? Yeah, excellent, that's what I want. Okay. The next one, this is a little tougher. It's the styloid process. On this skull, it is almost impossible to find because it's broken off short. I'll show you on a good skull and then I'll show you what on a not as good skull. All right, first of all, stylus. I want you to know what a stylus is. It's a writing thing, okay? Like if you ever were old enough to have a BlackBerry, you probably wrote with a stylus. Back in ancient times, before pencils, before ink pens, before a quill, the Phoenicians used a cut reed called a stylus to write in clay. Good? All right. Well, you need something really, really thin that sticks down that would resemble a writing implement, and it's right there on the bottom. Oh, I'll bring it over. It's huge. It's the styloid process. See how much it sticks up, how thin it is? It looks like a pencil lead. Yeah, those are styloid process. Are we good? Okay, because it looks like a stylus. Now next to that, we have a much bigger, you see this is huge compared to that.
Yeah, this is
Big, wide. Would you say this is massive?
Yes.
Mastoid process. The M should remind you of the massive one. When you see mastoid process, it's the big one that's on the bottom of the skull.
Reminds me of mastication.
I don't know that it's related. I would not think so. I can look it up later to see why.
Oh, that's where the jaw attaches, right?
No,
The mandible?
it attaches right here.
Oh, okay.
This is the mandibular fossa. That's
So
where
then
it attaches.
These bits here are the styluses, and
And
these
these are
bits
the
here
mastoid.
are the mastoids.
And they're actually
Okay.
hollow. There's actually a sinus inside.
Cool.
But yeah, this.
I had mine removed.
Your mastoid?
No, sorry, that was the something else. Never mind.
Okay, yeah.
That was something else.
I assume you probably.
I brain farted tonsils. That's what it was.
Yeah, you're fine. You'll do that when you do digestion. We'll talk about that in digestion.
All right.
All right. Okay, everybody focus, focus. We got to move on. So, for the temporal bone, you're going to need to be able to find the mandibular fossa, the external auditory meatus, the zygomatic process, the styloid process, the mastoid process. Are we good?
Yes.
All right, next, we're talking about the sphenoid bone. I'm going to pull up a picture of the sphenoid bone. I'm going to show you on the models as well. This is one you might miss if you're not even thinking about it, if you're not looking in the right place. You'll see it really well if you look inside the skull or if you look at the bottom of the skull. Anywhere else, you're going to miss it.
So we take the head off.
You mean take the cranium off the head? Yes, yeah. Take it off, okay? So, first I want to talk about its shape. And well, first I'll talk about, if somebody were to punch you there, what would you say in common speech it is?
Ow.
Well, yeah, ow works, but you said what I expected. Punched you in the temples, but guess what? The temporal bone is a little back and down, right? Right? What they're actually hitting are wings of the sphenoid bone. The sphenoid bone is mostly this little upside down butterfly in the skull. You see it? You see it? This looks like an upside down butterfly. I'm going to pull up the picture to make it easier, but that's the sphenoid.
SPH.
Yes, yes, and I'll pull it up right now. But the wings extend up onto the side, and you can punch them from there. Oh, and by the way, it's not good. Because the wing of the sphenoid is that spot right there that's under the zygomatic arch. Does that make sense?
So it's under the arch.
Yeah, yeah, I'm going to pull it up. You'll see it. Watch, watch. A leg? I always think it looks like a wing, but whatever works for you.
Ledge.
Oh, a ledge. Yeah, maybe kind of. All right, we'll go back to the projector, but right now. Everybody ready? This is going to be your sphenoid bone, what you see in yellow right here. Okay? Let me pull it up big. This is your sphenoid. Good? Yeah. All right, so that's where I said looking kind of like a butterfly. See? Well, this greater wing that sticks up, it also sticks up onto the sides. This is near vertical, and that's what I said could be punched. Does that make sense? Nobody's nodding. Are you with me?
Yes.
All right, good, good. Now let's talk about parts of the sphenoid bone. I'm going to go back to our list here. We'll eventually go back to the projector. But in the sphenoid, they want you to know the greater wing, the lesser wing, the optical canal, the sella turcica. So let's go back here. Would you agree when you saw that picture towards the front of the skull there was a bigger wing? That'd be greater. The smaller one would be lesser. So we're good there. Those aren't hard. The next two, though, the optic canal and the sella turcica.
Can you point out the lesser and the greater on this?
Yeah. I'll pull it back up on the picture too.
No, we just want to see it on the skull.
Yeah, okay. The problem is that the contrast is kind of rubbish. You would agree?
Oh, yeah.
But what we're dealing with is this would be greater, and coming up on the wall would be greater. Okay, there's greater. And this right here would be lesser. Let me pull up the picture again for you. All right. And you are 100% right to want that. What says the opposite? What did I do wrong?
Our lab book says that part that you just said was the greater.
Okay, they have it upside down.
If you press Control plus, it'll zoom in.
Oh, on which?
On your keyboard, Control plus at the
Okay.
same time, it'll zoom in.
Oh, yeah. I want to find a good picture for y'all though first. This is KinHub. Let's pull up the lab book and look though. And go ahead. So right here, the greater wing is the one on this. We'll look at your lab book. But your greater wing, greater is usually bigger. You would agree? Greater is the one closer to the front of the skull. You see it? Yes, I'm not getting a lot of nods. Lesser, do we agree this is smaller than this? Lesser, back here, okay, that would be, so greater wing. Oh, I see what they're doing. The greater wing is all of this, and the lesser is the raised area above it. That's fine. Greater is still bigger, lesser is still smaller, but you're right, they're not doing the back. They're putting lesser right there. Thank you for the clarification. That's good.
You're welcome.
All right. No, I appreciate it. What?
So this is
Thank you for clarifying back.
Yeah, well, we got to get it right. Okay. And while we are looking at this, the optic canal right there, this drawing is not stellar. So let's go to your lab book drawing. But what I want you to get is the optic canal is going to be towards the front of the sella turcica. So let's do the sella turcica first. All right. So, real quick.
Oh, there's 128. That's why I said in front.
There we go. So let's look. Why do I not have a scroll bar? That's annoying me. All right, we'll do it this way. No, stop it. They're being vile. Okay, I'm going back so you can see the whole thing. This is a saddle. Shh, too much talking. Go outside. I'm not kidding. This is a saddle. You're with me? Okay. See the 3 girth bands? That's one designed to stay on a horse no matter what. That's a jousting saddle. What they used in the ancient days, whenever they would ride at each other with lances and try and knock each other off the horse for a sport, yeah? Okay, why am I bringing this up? Because sella turcica is turkey seat, okay? I don't know why, that's what they chose. They're Turkish seat. The seat they're talking about is a saddle. What you're looking at is, put your finger in a deep groove right here in the sphenoid bone. Your pinky can go in it. Do you guys see it? I'm talking about this right here. All right. That was named, the seat part of the name is it looks like a saddle. It's very high in the front, very high in the back. You would agree? What lives there is your pituitary gland. Okay, yes. Yes, exactly, right there. That's your sella turcica, right there. And if you drilled a hole through it, there's a space underneath. A sphenoid is hollow in the middle. That would be your sphenoid sinus underneath. Good? But sitting in that saddle is your pituitary gland. Are you with me?
So
Good.
what is that called again?
This is a sella turcica. It's on your list. You have your
Turkish
phone
saddle.
ready?
Say, how do you pronounce it? Sella Turstica?
Sella turcica. Yeah. Sella is one word, turcica is another one. All right. But it looked a little bit like a saddle, like a place you would sit your butt if you were riding on a horse. That's where the pituitary sits. Are we good?
Yes.
All right. If you look next to it, I'm going to pull up a picture because, again, the model's plastic. It was too thick to go in and leave a hole. But you have the optic canal. Well, you can kind of see it from that side, not from the other. But let's go to optic canal. Why does it have to be so small? Such a good image. All right, that's not bad. So if we look at this right here, greater, lesser wings. Okay, posterior, anterior. I want a superior view. Do we not have a superior? All right, never mind. I was getting too excited. Superior view. Give me a superior view. A good one. Here we go. That's what we were looking at. And foramen are holes. Right here's the sella turcica. I'm going to move it down. Right here's the sella turcica. We agree? Right here would be the front of the skull. These are your optic canals. Those are where your nerves from your eyeballs come to the brain. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Now, those nerves that come from the eyeballs, when they get to the brain, they're actually going to cross over and then go to the opposite side of the brain. Don't worry, when we get to the brain, you'll see it. But there's an X on the bottom of the brain made by the two optic canals coming and crossing. And it has a name you'll need to know. It's called the optic chiasma. But that's later on. That's when we do nerves. Good?
Okay.
Good? All right. Now, back to our list. We've done greater and lesser wing, optic canal, and sella turcica. Do you agree?
Yes.
Now we're going to do another one that's really hard to find if you're not thinking, using your imagination. For this one, I'm actually going to pull up the Here we go. Let me see if I can get that bigger. Yeah, that's lovely. This is inside. The ethmoid bone is mostly inside of the nasal passage, okay? But you can see it in two ways. One, if we're looking down like this into the skull, this is frontal bone. This is frontal bone, and in between the two, right here, is ethmoid bone. You're looking from the top at the ethmoid bone. You're with me? Okay. And if you look from the back or up the nose, you can see ethmoid bone. But it's mostly inside the skull. Yes?
But the vomer,
Vomer is down below.
so this one?
Yeah, vomer's sticking up from the base. Ethmoid's the one coming down.
Okay.
In fact, you're ahead of me. You just pointed out one of the bony landmarks. The part that hangs down is the perpendicular plate of the vomer bone. Of the ethmoid bone. The part that sticks up from the bottom where they join, that is vomer. Okay? So let's pull up the list again. Everybody knows what we're looking at now, right? Bone mostly hidden, certainly hidden from the sides. By the way, it has a hollow spot inside. It has ethmoid sinus. You with me? Okay, but let's look at our list. The ethmoid has superior and middle nasal concave. Huh? Also called turbinate bones, by the way. If you want to see those, look up in here. You can touch them with the probe. Those are spirals of bone or wiggles of bone. What are they for? Well, they're part of the nasal cavity, they're part of smell. Okay? What's going on though? Would you agree that, we talked about this before, lining your trachea, there are things you don't want to get down in the lungs, and you have a mucus that's like flypaper for dust and bacteria and bad things, and then the the cilia move it up so you swallow it down your throat. That should sound familiar. Everybody good? All right. That mucus, that flypaper for bad stuff, to catch the bad stuff. Well, the ethmoid bone has the conchae, the turbinates, that they're named because they cause turbulence in air. When you breathe in, the air doesn't just go in, it has to swirl around to get around the little wiggles, and they're covered with epithelium that makes mucus. This is the snot in your nose, and this is why we have it. Because imagine, okay, I had to throw this safely. I didn't have a thing to throw before. Imagine that I am air, and I have a dust particle, a bacteria. Are you with me? And the air with the dust particle, have to deal with turbinate bones that make me change directions. You good?
Create turbulence.
What?
Create turbulence.
Yes, create turbulence, turbinate bones. But they want to call them nasal conchae. But suppose I am air and I have a piece of dust, bacteria, pollen, whatever. If I'm going towards the bone and I have to turn, the things I'm carrying continue and they get stuck to the mucus that covers these conchae. It keeps crap out of the lung.
It shakes the dust out of the air.
Oh, that's a polite way to put it. Yes, it takes the dust out of the air. It sticks it to the mucus that's part of the mucous membrane that covers the superior and middle conchae. Now, you probably guessed there's a lower spiral too, an inferior conchae. But the ethmoid bone, the superior in the middle. Good, good. I'm not hearing a lot of yeses. Are you with me so far?
Yes.
All right,
Can't
so we've
zigzag
done
if
the
you're carrying it
perpendicular
back.
plate, we've done the superior and the middle nasal conchae. Now we need to talk about the crista galli and the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. So everyone look into your skull and look. I am going to flip over now so you can see. In the front here, let's see if you could spot it. Yep, it's showing. This is ethmoid bone. We agree everything down here is ethmoid. Oh, yeah, you can do it. I just want to make sure they can see it too. This part that sticks up in the middle, like a shark fin or the sail on a sailboat, do you guys see it on your own models? That's the crista galli. It means the sailboat. It's like the sail on a sailboat sticking up, and that's what it means. It's right here, this triangle sticking up. Now, each side of it, in your model, you see a rough surface that's lower than the crista galli, yes? If you had a real skull in front of you, it's not a rough surface. It's full of holes, like a pasta strainer. Got it? Got it? The reason they have those holes, what you're looking at here is the home of the olfactory bulbs off of the brain. All right? Each olfactory bulb lies on each side of the crista galli. It's what keeps them separate. The spot they're laying in, that deep socket over the ethmoid bone, that spot is a special thing we call the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. The cribriform plate is the flat horizontal, but full of holes. Why those holes? Because you have an olfactory bulb and an olfactory bulb, crista galli between them, and each bulb sends nerve endings through the holes into your nose. Those are the nerve endings that get that detect chemicals and register as smell. Those signals go through the holes, back up to the bulb, and then back to the brain. Does this make sense? Okay. And it's called the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. It's the top horizontal part of the ethmoid bone, and then the crista galli sticks up. You're going to have to remember it any way you need to. The method that taught it to me, when I had my study group, when I was in grad school, I'm trying to remember it, they said, use the rhythm. I'm like, what? Now you're going to laugh because I have no rhythm. I'm trying this, but just work with me, okay? How do you memorize what that is? Because I'm like, I don't know. And one of the other students just went, the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. I know, but she has this look. I have no rhythm. I admitted it up front. But the cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone.
I was feeling
No, I
Okay.
ain't got rhythm.
The cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone. However, you have to memorize it. But it is the top horizontal, full of holes part of the ethmoid bone. Are you with me?
Cribbage board.
Okay, and the sella turcica is there right here in the sphenoid. Oh, we're past sphenoid, we're down, sorry. And the cristigale is the sticky uppy part. Good? All right, so we've done ethmoid. Now we have to do the occipital. It's not just the back of the skull, it's back and underneath. You with me?
Yes.
Okay. Like temporal is not just side, it's side and underneath. Good? All right. So let's pull it up, let's talk about it.
Where do the temporal and occipital bones meet? Like all three? Do they have like a single point where all three meet?
I would say
Or
probably yes. If we look,
is there a special name for that? Or
well, the suture from the outside would be right here, okay? And we would call that the squamosal suture. Think of it a big arching suture. We haven't done sutures yet, we're about to get to them. But you remember coronal suture and sagittal suture? The other really big ones we would have around the occipital bone, we call that the lambdoidal suture. And that is next to, here we have occipital and here we have parietal with the lambdoidal between them. Here we have occipital and here we have temporal. That's the lambdoidal between them. Good? So that probably lambdoidal would be the best thing for an explanation. But temporal and parietal that way, that would be the squamosal. Which, think of an arch, now think of it as kind of squashed flat, like squamous. I don't know what the word actually means, but that's how I remember it. Does that make sense? That's a good question, Alex. All right, so you've got those. Let's now look at that occipital that we talked about where it is. It's the next thing down on the study guide. We all have the study guide pulled up to follow, yes?
Yes.
All right. The foramen magnum, what's magnum mean?
big?
It's the big one. Foramen means hole. It's one of those things you have to memorize on 106.
It's the big hole.
Yes, the name, literally, it's fancy, it's Latin, it says the big hole. It's the big hole. It's what your spinal cord is going to go through. Good, good.
That's where
All right.
the vertebrae attach.
We're about to get to that. That's the next one down. So we did foramen magnum. The next thing is the occipital condyle. So the occipital bone has these raised, I'm showing from the side first. You see these raised lumps sticking up? These are occipital condyles, all right? And those are where the vertebrae hold on to the skull. Good? Well, who said no? I'll walk closer and show it to you.
Find it.
All right. Oh, it's huge. You gotta find it. Turn the skull over. Turn the skull over.
Oh, up there.
See these big lumps right here? Those are occipital condyles. Well, if you're looking at the
It would
inside,
be-
you have to look on the bottom of the skull.
It's on page 102.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. All right. You guys good? You have it? Everybody have it? You guys feel okay? Yep, that's right. All right, it's Greek mythology time, or horrible book by Ayn Rand. Yeah, never mind. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry, this is just, I just want to make sure this is not going to be on the test next Tuesday.
All of this is on the test. Every word I say.
Next Tuesday?
I didn't say for sure there was one next
Tissues and
Tuesday.
fingernails here.
No.
No, that if we do a lab test before, if we're doing a lab test before the spring break, it would be integumentary and
Right, not
tissues.
this.
No, not this.
These are bones.
Stop. Remember, I have ADD. Don't
I'm
confuse
sorry,
me.
but I just want to make sure.
Yeah, right. But that question you've not thrown me all off track.
Sorry,
This is being recorded.
Sorry.
Okay. Yeah, this is being recorded.
I'm sorry.
All right. Now, these are occipital condyles. What I was about to say,
Vertebrae.
yeah, how many people have heard of Atlas? Okay, Greek mythology Atlas, or the horrible book by Ayn Rand. Yeah, I offered an inflammatory opinion right there, I'm sorry. I do believe it's a horrible book. All right, so these are vertebrae. You have vertebral columns like this with all of them. Okay, I have a sternum in the way. You can find them on either one. I told people to get these, but I don't think too many people remembered. What I want you to see is a very special vertebrae. This is the first vertebrae. It's the one that rests against the skull. Okay? You know it because it doesn't have a spinous process. All the others have a spinous process. This is actually upside down. That would be where the spinous process would be. These are called the transverse processes, go off to the side. And in the cervical vertebrae, they have holes. That's the only vertebrae that have holes there through the transverse process. The vertebral arteries go through these holes. Good? Yeah? Okay, so if you see these holes, you know you have a cervical vertebrae. This is a special cervical with no spinous process sticking up. Good? Good? It's called the atlas. And the reason it's called the atlas is that in Greek mythology...
It holds the whole weight.
Yes. Atlas was someone who had... Basically, in Greek mythology, if you make a god angry, you have a very bad life. And to make it extra horrible, they might then make you immortal so it never ends. Like, think of Sisyphus, who upset some gods, and he had to spend eternity pushing a rock up a hill. Right, okay? Well, Atlas made some people mad, and he had to hold the world on his shoulder and had to walk around the sun for eternity. He's what moved the earth in Greek mythology. Well, what's big and round and kind of like a planet? It's a skull. See the roundness? Okay, so the occipital condyles, let me put it the right direction. No, it's pointing in the right direction. Yeah, it helps if I get it at the right angle. The occipital condyles of the skull rest on the bone we call the atlas, the first vertebrae. You just nodded. Do it again. Do it again. Everyone nod. Everyone nod. That movement is the occipital condyles rubbing on the atlas. Good? Now, yes?
Is there an intercalated disc between the
Between
the disc between the atlas and the skull, or just like there is between all the other,
if you look at both of these,
whatever it's called?
the next one is the axis, and we're about to get to that. Do you notice there's not much of a cell body? Okay, so there's nowhere to put a disc. Okay.
Okay.
You can't put a disc there because it got no body.
So that's just bone on bone?
They're going to be spaced out a little by connective tissue and fat. But yeah, I don't believe there's a disc there.
There's no, whatever it's called, the shock absorption one?
Fibrocartilage.
Fibrocartilage,
I will
that's right.
look and see, but I don't recall ever hearing about a disc right there. And part of it, the atlas, I was just about to say this, the atlas is so close to the skull, we did nodded like this for skull rubs on atlas, yes? Now turn your head this way. The atlas goes with the skull. Shaking your head side to side like no is having the vertebrae 1, the atlas, and vertebrae 2, the axis, rub against each other. Does that make sense? Okay, the atlas will turn with the skull. So no, side to side. That is a movement between these two vertebrae. Right, like this. I'm going to put them next to each other so you can see them. I can do it on the projector too, but they sit like this. The skull is here against the atlas. Good? And when you turn your head, you do that. The reason we call this one the axis, you know how the world spins around an axis, yes? The axle of the car is what the wheel spins around, yes? Okay? Well, there is a pointy part that sticks up. We'll name it in a minute. There's a pointy part that sticks up on this bone, and the skull and vertebrae 1, the atlas, move around that pointy part. Let me bring it close. Or let me put it on the projector so you can all see. That might help more people. All right, here I have two vertebrae. Do you agree? All right, can you see it?
Yep.
All right, let me try turning the light on. Does that help? No. Doesn't help. All right, so here we have, see how nice those two pieces, these articular surfaces fit together? They slide past each other really well. Let me move my fingers out of the way. They slide past each other really well. Look at this part that sticks up. It's a piece of vertebrae 2. It's a piece of the axis. That's why we call it the axis, because that's what vertebrae 1, the atlas, rotates around. Are you with me? So we call the second one the axis because rotating around it. Good?
And that's the fancy name?
No, I'm about to give you the fancy name. So the sticky up part that we're doing the rotating around, it looked to them kind of like a fang on a dog or a cat. It's too rounded in my opinion, but it looks kind of sticky up like a tooth might look. Do you agree? Okay. Well, there are two names for it. I'll take either one. You could call it the odontid process. Think of orthodontia, tooth. Or you could call it the dens, which is another term for it, which like dentist. It means the tooth. Either way, this sticky up part that is part of vertebrae 2 is supposed to resemble a tooth.
It's the
Good.
dens, you said?
Yes, you could call this, I'll take either one, a dens or an odontid process. It is part of the axis that things rotate around. And the axis is the first vertebrae that has this really special, see if I can show it to you very well. Not very well, we'll go to a bigger one. But it has, if you look at yours, there's a V, there's a fork. Do you agree? I'm not hearing a lot of yeses, so let's try with one that's further down. We'll go with like 3 or 4, where the fork is bigger. There's a dens. Oh, here's a really good one, easy to see. So remember, I said cervical vertebrae all have what? Holes in what?
The sides for the
Transverse process, good.
for the arteries.
Vertebral canals or transverse foramen, transverse foramen. But this is the other thing. Most, not all, have a very forked sinus process. You see the two pieces?
Yes.
Left, right, okay. I'm going to give you this is just me, you would expect this. Hey, let's learn about the animals version of the vertebrae, how to tell vertebrae apart. So what you should remember about cervical vertebrae are two things. One of them is you should remember those canals. If you see those canals, it's a cervical vertebrae. Good? But the other one is that fork. So, here we go. Let's pull up a better one. This is an extinct rhino. It doesn't exist. It's my second favorite extinct rhino. It's called Megaceratops or a Brontotherium. But you see the fork? It had a double horn like that instead of a single horn. You're with me? That should remind you of the vertebrae. If you see a vertebrae that has a little bit of a fork, it's a cervical vertebrae. It looks like a Brontotherium. Good? Good? Yes?
What do you call the forking?
The spinous process. Let's go over these really quick. We're about to do parts of the vertebrae, and they're probably in your book on what? It wasn't loud enough for me to hear, but that's okay if everyone else heard it. Yeah, on 133. Okay. So if you look, this part that the way I'm holding it is sticking up, we would call it spinous process. That's the one that are the bumps on your back when someone rubs their hand down your spine. Good? They're sticking to the back, sticking to the posterior. But that's your spinous process. Then we have, going off to the sides, the transverse process. Here we have the vertebral arc. Good. The bases of the arc would be the pedicels. Like I said, only in cervical does the transverse have the holes, the transverse foramen. This would be the body. Are we good? Yes? No? When we talk about intervertebral discs, they're fibrocartilage discs to absorb shock. They're between the bodies of different vertebrae. Now, if you look at from the side, you can see articular surfaces sticking forward. Like, say I'm the vertebrae. If I have pieces that go upwards, those would be the superior articular surfaces. Good. And then we have ones that stick down. Those would be the inferior. Superior touch the inferior of the vertebrae above them. Good? Yes? Mm-hmm. All right.
Are they just for support?
What?
Are they just for support, or do they help increase surface area for nerves, or what?
Great question. I'm not positive I know, Alex, but I'm going to give you a hint, or sorry, a guess, a hypothesis. Don't take this as gospel. I do know that some vertebrae have more range of motion than others. And I think the shapes of the articular surfaces control how much turning there is. For instance, if you try to turn your back, oh, I'm turning your back, guess what? You're turning the lumbar area of your spine. You're not turning the thorax. The rib cage is not turning. Does that make sense? Part of that would be, hey, the ribs are attached there, but part of it might also be the articular surfaces being the wrong shape for rotation. Like I said, it's a hypothesis. Good? All right. Anyway, so we had that. We have cervical vertebrae. Let's jump to thoracic vertebrae. Are you ready?
Yes.
First, I'm going to point out cervical vertebrae. Fork, fork, fork. You saw that, yeah? Those are cervical vertebrae with the forks, okay? Not all the forks are perfect. That one's not too great. Now look at the thoracic vertebrae. You see how they're kind of pointed and pointed downward? You see that? Okay? I want you to think of the face of an anteater called a tamandoo. Look at this cute little animal's face. Okay? What do you mean not cute? That was a cruel thing to say. It's adorable. It's adorable. And the ones that people use pets, there's one named Stewie he loves to eat cheese with. We'll talk about it later. I can show you videos. But his nose, would you agree, it's shaped a lot like thoracic vertebra with the pointed down and the pointiness? Yeah? Okay. So that's easy to tell. Cervical, brontotherium. Thoracic, you've got the tamandoo nose. Good? Now we're ready for lumbar. Let's look at the lumbar. You see this big, thick, chunky? Yeah. Take your vertebrae that you have. I see some people doing it. Take your vertebrae and look. You should have one. Big, thick, chunky, yes? All right. I'm going to pull up another picture.